in your book, you've take the Jesus story, but you deal with it in a very interesting way. I'll let you explain what that is and how it is you chose about it. How did your telling of the Jesus story in this book play out in your mind, and how did it eventually come to how it is in the book?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. Yeah, so in the book, I focus on after a couple of preliminary chapters where I talk about how I approach the Bible and why I'm focusing on one story rather than lots. So I sort of make some comments about universalism. The rest of the book is taking the major events of the Jesus story, but dealing with them backwards, starting at the end and working backwards. So I start with the second coming, and then go to the resurrection, then the crucifixion, and then I jump and miss out all of Jesus's ministry and jump to the nativity. And again, my 20 years ago, who I was then would be very disapproving about what I'm doing now in terms of telling the Jesus story like this. But the reason I'm doing it is because, firstly, this is how the Jesus story made sense to me when it clicked. So I did a course in applied Christian studies. That was my first bit of theological education. For all of my theological education, I've had to go outside of Quakers to do it because it's not readily available within Quakerism. And this course called Workshop did a weekend. One of the weekends of the course was called Reimagining Hope. And it talked all about the end times and all the theology around the future. And it just lit me on fire. And I sort of realized that it's the end of the Jesus story, like the ends of lots of stories, that helps make sense of everything that's gone before. So the end of a story gives shape to the whole, and it puts everything else in perspective. Sort of a bit like a murder mystery, where the detective at the end explains what's gone on, and then the whole of the story makes sense. And so I think the end of the Jesus story is what makes sense of everything else. And we see this in the Gospels, in that the Gospels are being told from a post-resurrection perspective. During Jesus's life,
absolutely,
sort of pre-crucifixion, the disciples don't get it. They don't get it. They're constantly getting it wrong. It's only at the resurrection appearances that they understand. And also this has been very much heavily influenced by one of my favorite theologians, who's a German Reformed theologian called Jürgen Moltmann. He wrote a book in the 60s called Theology of Hope, and he sort of brought all of this sort of eschatology, it's called in theology, technical terms, like this theology of the end of the future. And he brought that back onto the scene and talked a lot about the light of the future sort of shining into the present. And so that's also been an inspiration for me in switching it up like this. Also, I miss out Jesus's ministry stuff because I think all of Jesus's ministry, all of his teachings only make sense in the context of these other events. And so the second coming for me is all about the kingdom of God, and that's what Jesus's teachings are about. And a lot of his teachings are him pointing towards the crucifixion or the resurrection. So I think that's why I don't have a chapter on his earthly ministry, because I think it only makes sense within those big events. The nativity I put at the end. Now, I'm not invested in the nativity stories as historical events. I'm very happy to see those as sort of mythological origin stories. I mean, I think they're highly theological stories that making a theological point. And I see those as encapsulating all the other parts of the Jesus story. I see the nativity story as as like a seed that contains the rest of the Jesus story in it in various forms. It's always sort of, if the second coming casts its light into the present, the nativity is all about foreshadowing what's to come.
Well, thank you very much for watching that short clip. I hope you found it interesting. If you'd like, please do click on the link to watch the full interview. And if you haven't already, please do consider liking and subscribing to find out more about Quakerism in Britain today. Thanks very much.